Caitriona, welcome to the House of Visionaries
Thank you so
podcast.
much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. So today is all about getting to know you, Caitriona. Super excited for the chat and hopefully for the community to get to know you better. So just to start, for those of you that don't know, Caitriona, she's had an incredible career across some of the most respected tech companies in the world. Starting her career at Google and career within TA at Google, and since then worked across some of the biggest tech companies and some big corps, as well as now more so in that high growth environment. And now VP of People at Primer, so a fully remote business operating across 35 countries. But what I love, and we'll probably touch on today, is not just the track record of scaling businesses, but the way in which you've done that, Caitriona. Obviously, high growth, high autonomy, high freedom cultures, and I know that's a passion of yours. So excited to jump into that. But you make the perfect addition to our UK board of Visionaries. So we're very excited to have you, and excited to chat
Well, thank
today.
you. I think the Irish in me really struggles to hear compliments. So I really appreciate the very kind intro. But yeah, I'm so excited just to be part of a community, I guess, that's thinking as hard about a problem than I do, and what I've been trying to really concentrate on my career so far. Just to be surrounded by people who, are as excited about the space and about solving the problem and really just being ahead of the curve is super motivating, and just honored to be part of the group.
Yeah, likewise, we're very lucky to have you, and excited to get to know you better and hopefully go on an incredible journey with the community to add as much value as we can. So we always start with the UK board asking the same question on theme. So what does visionary actually mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it really made me reflect on my career and the folks who really stand out as being visionary. I think with LinkedIn today and all the noise that's there, it's sort of easy to look at visionary as being the folks who are loudest in the room, who are posting all that, uh, content. But actually, when I think about the people who've really, really sort of changed the game in terms of, the work environments I've been in, um, I think it's a couple of things. I think number one, that ability to sort of see around the corner before other folks do, to really pick up on trends, whether that's from talking to candidates and just getting a sense as to how, the talent demands and sort of what candidates want, evolves. I think, some of the most visionary people I've worked with have really been able to read those trends and sort of spot what we need to do to adapt. And I think just really being able to see into the future before everyone else. But I also think that the visionary folks who stand out to me is also just this sort of sense of boldness, being able to be brave and not follow everyone else. I think it's quite easy to conform to how everyone else is doing things. But I think to have that sort of that conviction and boldness to do something a bit different, to experiment, to be vulnerable, I think it really stands out in the folks who I've learned from. And that's everything from like just trying some big experiments, knowing that stuff is going to fail, because people who are just bring such sort of humor and lightness to work when it can be so serious. I think they're the people who are not just sort of visionary in what they do, but just really influential as to me is how I've sort of grown as a leader as well. But I've been, I think, very lucky to work with very visionary people along the way. And actually, if I think about some of my predecessors, I've never been in a company from day one. So I've always, my smallest company would have been about 100 people when I joined. So I've always had, some work to build on. And I think I've been lucky to actually have some great predecessors who've built strong foundations for me to work on. But yeah, I mean, if I think of some examples, I started my career at Google. Very lucky to have sort of joined a company that was really obsessing about how to do talent right. How to build the best work environment that's going to attract the best people, it's going to keep them. And when I joined 20 years ago, the really visionary thing that Laszlo Bock, the chief people officer at Google, was doing, was this whole move towards bringing people scientists to the team. I think it was something like a third of the people team at one point was analytics and people scientists. And for the first time, just getting really scientific about what made a great environment. And that was very visionary at the time. We ran loads of experiments, learned loads of lessons about, how not to hire, how not to build cultures, but just learned a lot about what great looks like too, and that sort of discipline that you can really bring to hiring. And if I think about then sort of moving on from that one, I joined Atlassian quite early on before they were sort of the huge global company they are today. And those founders, were obsessed with values and having a values-driven culture, and of course, a values-driven EVP and employer brand. And again, that was something that other companies weren't doing to the same extent when I joined. And I think that was very visionary, and it allowed us to just win talent that we wouldn't have had access to in the past. And it was really genuine too. And I think that's probably what differentiated it. People who I worked with would always say that they stayed because of the values, and they'd never find a culture the same. So lucky enough to have tons of examples of visionaries. But I really appreciated the question, because I'm not sure if I had reflected on it quite as much before. But yeah, instantly I've got people in my mind who've really shaped, who I try to be as a leader.
Yeah, that sounds like very fortunate to be around some incredible people early on in your career that have probably helped shape some of that thinking. And I loved your point on like the lightheartedness and the fun as well, because yes, you need the courage, yes, you need the vision, you need to be looking sort of around the corner and have the courage to go and do that. But I've not heard anyone talk about like the fun and the energy and the lightheartedness as much, because I do think there is a level of infection that brings, and that is just as important, I think, to drive and influence the business forward. So yeah, I love that take on
I'll
it.
do a shout out to Sarah. I think of two people who were great with this, but Sarah was amazing at what she did. She's a very sort of experienced, serious HR leader that took her job very seriously and was liked by a lot of people. But she didn't take herself very seriously, to the point where we'd be on video chats and she might message me and like send me dares of like things to do on the chat when we're supposed to be doing something serious. But I just so appreciated it, because I think we can get so caught up in how hard work can be day to day, and to bring that sort of silliness and fun without it detracting from how great you are at your job. Like, yeah, I loved that. And just being able to wear your heart on your sleeve a bit more and sort of bring yourself and not be sort of scared to do that, I think was, yeah.
Well, we spend so much time at work, we want to enjoy it, right? We want to have some fun with it. So I think if you can get that level of like intensity and professionalism, but also bring some fun to it, that's like the perfect formula.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, amazing. So let's rewind, Caitriona. Let's get to know you. So if we look back at the early days in your career, what would you say were the biggest influential moments, or who has been the biggest influence on your career in those early stages?
Yeah, I mean, my career did not start off particularly glamorously. So, first of all, I was in a very old school insurance company, interned there, and my first role was there, and I learned a lot about sort of what not to do, I guess, there. It was old school corporate. My boss, I think, called me princess because I still lived at home. It was like very, very old school. HR was very much paperwork, like literally paperwork. But quite early, I managed to get a contracting role at Google. I didn't know I was a contractor until day one. I was completely lost and just happy to be there. I also didn't know I was in recruiting. I thought I was going to be in HR. But I was a recruiting coordinator. I was scheduling interviews. I learned how much I loved it. I think I loved the hustle of it, like the competitiveness. I was very diligent, so I would never leave the office without every candidate having heard back from me. And so I think just that real, just really enjoying it from the early days helped me to sort of grow into the role and get some really nice opportunities. I think early on, I was seconded out to our Google headquarters in the US from where I was in Ireland, in Dublin. And it was early days. So even though it was Google, we were still reviewing every single hire that we were bringing into Google with a 30-page printed document, all about them, all about their hiring process, the feedback. Any recruiter who's worked at Google will remember those days. So my job at the time was literally to drive like stacks of paper to the executive office where, the Google founders were there in their sort of cycling gear, which they lived in. But we went through every single hire page by page and sort of got to decide whether folks there sort of met the bar. And we weren't really afraid of false negatives. We rejected a lot of great people, a little bit arrogant, I guess, that way back then. But we were so scared of false positives where we would bring someone on and they wouldn't be right for Google. We really wanted to make sure that when we gave someone that, that badge, that they were going to be there for the long term. So it wasn't glamorous. I was making tea for the executives and driving around these pieces of paper, but I got to sort of witness a lot of like the really visionary thinking back then. And for me, that's really stuck in my career, like just how important it is to invest time in the talent process. A lot of hiring managers, a lot of people want to sort of skip through it and not really sink the time that it takes to find greatness. But we did. We were painstakingly making sure that every person was not just meeting the bar, but raising it. Things I've carried through, like never hire out of urgency. It's really hard to do. We need this person tomorrow. But really just being strict on ourselves and holding ourselves accountable to what we're looking for, and never rushing. Never dropping the bar for a single hire, no matter what role in the company they bring. So no matter how junior, we would always make sure that the same bar was held. Making sure that not one person had like a single veto. It was very much decision by committee, again, to sort of remove that bias. And also just the element of diversity and the kind of guardrails you can put in to make sure that you don't build a homogenous company. So yeah, I feel like I had a front row seat in a lot of that exploration and sort of the analytics that we did at the company, but also just what it took to win the best talent. And I took that to my jobs after that. Obviously adapted it to different companies. Not everyone is Google, but some of those lessons I learned there really, shaped who I am and how I treat hiring.
Yeah. I mean, the attention to detail there, 30-page document to go over a single hire for every single person, the volumes that Google will be hiring at, I think just shows the level of intent to get to maintain that bar at such a high level.
Actually, just remembering as I talk through it, one of the things that really sort of tests this and sort of, I guess, demonstrates how strict we were. I got a referral from Larry Page, founder of Google. He referred someone for a role. I put them through the process. I don't think they got very far. I might have even rejected them after my first call, but we rejected them. I messaged Larry to say, hey, we're not hiring this person into your company. No questions. Nobody questioned the process. Nobody sort of said, hey, should we double check, that this mightn't be the right person. We trusted the process so fully that, not even the founder could bring someone in if they didn't.
What a cool story. What a very cool story. I love that. And I think that's like the perfect scenario, right? Everyone is bought into the process. Everyone trusts the process. How, at Google specifically, how like living that yourself, how did everyone buy into that? Was it driven by the people team, the TA team, or was this company-wide that everyone understood the exact process and everyone was fully bought into it? Because sometimes you might get TA driving it, but maybe the hiring community are not necessarily bought into that process. So what did that
It was a little bit of both. One of my roles sort of on the back of that secondment was to go to Asia Pacific and sort of make sure that we had a standard approach across the world. We were starting to have very regional differences in what the bar was and what a strong process would be. And so we definitely collectively came up with an approach that was going to work for Google. It was not going to be popular. Hiring managers did not get to make the decision. And so, we really had to bring people on the journey of why investing up front and sort of being so diligent and so thorough paid off dividends in the end. So it was, we used a lot of analytics, a lot of these scientists to sort of prove our point, but then we really needed to sort of take folks on the journey and bring them in. And then, people knew that was the way to get hired at Google, right? We didn't make any compromises for anyone, and therefore you mightn't like it, but everyone knew that this is how we hired. And we really didn't have a retention problem. Like, once we hired folks, we were very confident that they were going to be with us for the long run. So,
Amazing. Love that. Now, you mentioned the high bar there and the level of detail. I want to touch on you've clearly throughout your career, and we'll probably get into it, but you've got a passion for high autonomy, high performance, high freedom culture. Was that driven through your experience at Google? Was it something you're personally passionate about? Like, where has that come from to want to sort of pursue that type of environment throughout your career?
It's definitely been a journey. I think Google did had some great early visionary views on how to build work environments for great people. At Atlassian, we scaled from a few hundred people to a few thousand when I left through IPO, and grew globally. What we were big on there is hiring for values, and I think when we hired for the likes of accountability and openness, and it being okay to make mistakes, that really supported this sort of high freedom, high autonomy environment, right? We knew that adults didn't need rules; they needed strong context, shared understanding of where we're going, and then trust. I would say probably tooling as well. So having the right resources, but we were more focused on giving people the support they needed to do the job, versus trying to create too many policies or rules or guardrails. I think one of the key things is designing for the 95% plus folks who it's going to work great for, knowing that you might get a few folks along the way, some who mistreat a policy or take advantage of sort of some of the freedoms. But I think that's the ROI that you get from the 95% massively covers the one or two folks who might try to spoil it for others. And I think that's, it's definitely been tested in my career, where I think leaders in particular can get a bit scared when they do see that. If I think about unlimited holidays, which I've had in my last few jobs, I'm a huge advocate of it. I think when one person takes a lot of holidays, there's an easy reaction, which is, let's just limit it. When actually, again, anytime I've done the analysis on this, different people need different amount of time off. Often some of the best people, like the people who've flown up through their career, are the kind of people who just work really intensely and then disappear for a month, and that's fine. So I think it's a hard for folks who haven't come from high trust, high accountability environments to sort of trust that people with this accountability and freedom will treat it right. Another one that comes to mind, it's another Google example, but back in Australia, when I was based out of Sydney, we decided to bring in an ice cream freezer to the office. We had a lot of great perks in the office, and food was one of them. But ice cream was going to be brought in, alongside the free lunches and dinners that we had. And of course, the natural reaction is to limit the number of ice creams people can have, because, if suddenly everyone's eating ice creams all day, that's going to cost a lot of money. So to counter that, the idea originally was, well, let's lock it Monday to Thursday, and on Friday people get to eat ice creams, and then that's going to limit, it's going to like cap the budget, and we won't overspend. But psychologically, as soon as something is taken from someone, they're going to like double down on making sure they get what's they deserve. And so just on Friday, people were eating like 3 ice creams. They were like queuing up. Exactly. No interest in eating ice cream, but of course this was the day they had to eat it. But I think of that one because I think it's the same applies to a lot of things. If you try to squeeze people or put in too many guardrails, I feel like they generally try to push those boundaries more than just saying, we want an environment where you know how to do your best work. The best hours, the best place. And And when you hire well and get those folks who are really high accountability, you get so much more in return, right? Like they're more likely to work in an evening if something needs to be done. They're more likely to go the extra mile for a colleague. Then when you start to sort of infantilize them or like make up too many rules. So I think it's a challenge, particularly on the people side, to have like the right amount of rules and the right amount of freedom. But I'm a big supporter of this sort of high trust environment where we just hire great people who work well that way.
I think it's like on paper, it's an amazing environment. If you can create that, I think the challenge comes with actually doing it, and it sort of leans back into like the visionary piece that we talk about. You've got to be courageous, you've got to be bold, you've got to stick by your guns, like put your stake in the ground. If this is the way that we're going to build our business, we're going to stick by it. Because I imagine on that journey, there'll be people that say, oh, we're going to launch a new location. Actually, we could probably just put boots on the ground there and we can get an office. Or it's like, no, the business culture is this. We have to stick by it.
Yeah, it's having that conviction and just not compromising along the way when there are so many opportunities too and so many strong opinions about what works better. But yeah, it's a USP and I think you need to lean into it.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially in today's world where like flexibility and autonomy is so valuable to people, I think it's like a massive USP. So if we continue on the journey with your career then, Caitriona, so you've mentioned there Google, Atlassian, a few thousand people, IPO, and then you sort of shifted into more high growth tech scale ups. Was that a natural transition? Was it intentional? Like, how did you sort of find yourself doing that?
Yes and no. So I think I probably could have lived at Google forever. It was kind of my first job, and I was the happiest employee there. And I was very comfortable, and I thought I was learning loads after 8 years, when in reality I probably stopped learning after 5. It was busy, it was intense, so I think I felt like I was learning all the time. But it was only when actually Atlassian, I was down in Sydney, not a huge tech scene. It was sort of Canva, Atlassian, Google. But Atlassian was coming up, I guess, a lot on my radar. It was small, it was young, and it was just at that inflection point where they really needed to sort of get the foundation right now before scaling. And so, I think that move gave me a bit more confidence and a bit more, I guess, maturity to understand the gaps in my own learning and how just being more uncomfortable was going to pay off in the long run. So that was great. I got to go in at a really interesting time for them and sort of really take what I'd learned, but just instantly learned how narrow my own learning had been and how sort of much broader my role could be, which then I took again to my next role, sort of going from talent then to sort of a broader people and talent role. And I think that's sort of been my my journey, just wanting to take slightly broader roles where I can learn more, always around really smart people. I've sort of picked the companies based on, can I be the least smart person in the room? If yes, then I'm going to learn a lot. And I think I can confidently say I've done that. Improbable was like a really interesting one. It was 100 people. Again, really early days, but just some really great ingredients for growth. Brilliant founder, brilliant founding team, great predecessor who I learned a lot from. And got to take them on that sort of hockey stick journey, which was much more common sort of pre 2021, scaled globally very, very quickly. But actually then pivoted, so became a venture builder. We realized on our journey that we were great at building companies around sort of this core piece of technology, all very different business strategies. We sort of built companies and shipped them out and exited them. So that was a great learning. I had never sort of been in that environment before, and learned a ton. But after the 7 years of learning that, then where I am now was sort of a natural next move for me.
Yeah, I love it. I think also when you talk about your career, you said you've broadened your skill set as well. So you've gone TA, then to TA and people. You're probably wearing 100 hats versus one hat. So I think it's an amazing opportunity to go on a journey like that with a scale up. Cool. So we've got some questions from the community, Caitriona. We've asked them what would they like to know about our UK board. So a couple of quick fire questions. So the first one is, what's the biggest challenge that you see in the people and TA space in 2026?
There are so many of them. I think a lot about signal and noise. I think obviously we now just have AI tools that we dreamed of years ago. But I think with that, it also just has become very noisy. And I think a little bit harder for our teams to sort of really stay focused on the fundamentals. We talk in my team about being extraordinary at the ordinary. And I think when thinking about sort of the hype of AI and all the places we can take it, it's really being disciplined enough to like not drop the basics along the way. I say that in the same breath. I say, keeping up with the amazing shifts in the AI space, right? It's really being able to differentiate the noise from what's really gonna change the game. And so I think there's a huge challenge. I think talent teams are the hardest working teams I've ever worked with. I think their job is just so hard, and we're often undervalued. But I think it's going to be, how do we grasp the potential of these new incredible tools, but not get caught up in the noise and the distraction.
I love that. Extraordinary at the ordinary. I love that. I think it's just that I do think it is a balance of like AI it's here, it's not going away, but there's a lot of noise, and it's how can we use it as an amplifier and not a replacement. But also I think a lot comes down to just great people. If you hire great people, if you invest in great people, they will find the right balance between like being great at extraordinary at the ordinary, but also leveling up, like what do we need to invest in, what do we need to layer in to keep moving forward. But it's a tough ask at the minute because there is so much noise. So I think we're in a very pivotal sort of 12 months for a lot of businesses to understand like what the landscape might look like. But very, very interesting, which is what the House of Visionaries is all about. It's connecting those leaders and understanding like what are you doing? What can we share? How can we add value?
I think, luckily, I mean, like the best talent folks I know, their skill set is exactly, I guess, what's going to be needed more and more in the years to come, right? With all of the signal and technology, it's the humanness, right? It's like the relationship building, the judgment that they bring, like all the stuff that AI can't or shouldn't do, because picking the next job in your career is such a personal thing. To be able to be the human in all of that, and all that sort of process is obviously the differentiator.
Yeah, it's a very interesting space at the minute. So the next question we've got is, what is one HR or TA trend that is just massively overhyped?
I'm not convinced on putting AI on an org chart. I know there's ongoing debate on that. For me, it's like, when we first got access to Google and search, I think it's great to have amazing tools, but I think it's confusing when we conflate agentic AI with people, right? I think every person needs to have a tool. Yes, we can have people in charge of the agents. But for me, it's very different to what a person brings, and sort of leadership and management and all that. So not convinced on that side. I mean, it's an obvious one, but I think the debate around in-office versus remote is still hot. I'm very much on the remote side. Not for everyone. I totally get why in-office culture is great for some folks, but I think for those who have decided that they are remote only, I think there's a huge competitive advantage in that if they get it right and they sort of build it very intentionally. So I guess the back to office mandate, or this sort of new expectation for people to now be in the office again, I push back on.
yeah, we've had a bit of a whirlwind few years post-COVID when everyone was sort of forced to work remote, and now we're seeing a bit of a transition back in office. So it'll be interesting to see where we land. So the final one from the community, Caitriona, if you weren't in talent and people, if you could have any career, what would you choose?
Career. I'm in the right career. I love the adrenaline. I love the competition. I love the pace at which people in talent work. I love the sort of the responsibility of getting to create environments where people spend all of their time, right? It's like all of their time outside of family and friends is working. And so I think it's huge responsibility to get that right. It might be a little bit biased. I spent the week on a farm with my kids. We live in central London,
Yeah.
but we got to spend the weekend with friends at a farm. And there was a lot about that I thought, wow, have I missed a trick here? I mean, I love the hard work. I'm not shy of that. It's very hard work. But I also loved just sort of being outside, not being stuck to a computer, slightly slowing down the heart rate and being at one. But I think that's probably quite cliche as the exact opposite of of the one I'm in now. So
Yeah.
I'm in the right career, but I think probably need to spend a bit more time balancing it with totally.
Yeah, I think the kids would love it. I know certainly I've got three boys. They would absolutely love it if we moved to a farm and every day was spent with the animals and out on the outdoors. I think there's something to be said for the outdoors lifestyle. So yeah, love that. Maybe in the future, watch this
Yeah.
space. Cool. So if we zoom into today, then Caitriona. So we've spoke about Primer, obviously fully remote business. You've mentioned 35 countries you're operating across, and we've touched on this like high performance, high autonomy culture. But in practice, because so many people try to achieve this, in practice, what does that actually look like day to day?
Yeah, I really was attracted to Primer because of the fact that they've built culture from day one as remote, right? We didn't pivot during COVID. It really has been intentional since day one. And so I find that such an amazing challenge to get this right across so many countries, and particularly as we scale. So goes without saying, really fundamental values that just very clearly tell people who we are, who we're not, lived every day, reinforced every day, not just something that we pop into onboarding. We do some very intentional things to make sure that we all know each other despite not being in the same office. So face-to-face opportunities, we sort of take what we would have spent in a real estate budget. We don't just sort of save that back. We use that on getting folks together for an annual company retreat and actually biannual team workations. I was on workation with my team last week, but an opportunity for us to go off site somewhere great, like somewhere where people really want to hang out, like a cool city or by the beach, and like really have that time together as a team, getting shared context, getting to know each other better, having a bit of fun, spending a lot of time actually solving problems. So actually the FaceTime in a remote culture, I think, is really important, but just in a very intentional way. We have things that I've tried to use in other companies, but that have really worked here. So simple, but donuts. I think probably plenty of people have donuts. Our culture is that people take donuts very seriously. These are 15-minute random calls that are scheduled into your diary once a week, but that every single person shows up for, from CEO down, because it's not just sort of a 15-minute coffee or chit chat. It's your opportunity to get to know someone on the other side of the business who you wouldn't bump into sort of otherwise. And I think in a remote culture where it's quite formal to talk to someone because you're putting time in their diary, it's so important for us to like keep this donut culture going. Recognition as well, really, really high on recognition, both sort of peer to peer. So we make sure everyone has a budget to allocate to their peers every month. It's use it or lose it. So people are really generous. Every time someone does something that's like either very impressive or very like helpful, it's straight onto tacos, and everyone gets to see each other being called out. We do like a bigger one every 2 weeks where we have the GOATs, so the greatest of all time, but we're like really, really intentional about recognition so that again, everyone knows each other as we grow. Everyone sort of has that opportunity to get to know folks in other teams. So there are a couple of the things that we do. Obviously, as we scale, we need to sort of think about how that works at a company that's north of 3 or 500. But I think these sort of shared rituals that you build early really help people understand sort of who we are as a business, like what we care about, what we reward. And that coupled with our really flexible policies, so like high freedom, high autonomy, it is for me the essence of the environment that I'm trying to build here. And hopefully we get access to talent that we otherwise may not have, because we can hire folks who get a lot of candidates who are neurodiverse, don't like to commute, parents who just need the flexibility to do the school run, folks who just don't want to live in cities, who want to have a life in the countryside. So I think we get to really sort of punch above our weight with both the flexibility, but also the high trust environment as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think, to your point earlier, it's a massive USP in today's world. I think if you can get it right and it's proven to work, and they're coming in and it's very slick, it's intentional, it's amazing. So the next 5 years, if we're thinking visionary, we've touched on this company's pushback to get into office. What's your view on like where this goes? Not just at Primer, because we know your vision there, but in the broader remit of like people in TA and how businesses operate. Where do you think we'll see businesses going in the next 5 years, say?
Yeah, I mean, it's been such an interesting 5 years in our world. I feel like the next 5 might just be a little bit crazier. Things are just exponentially getting faster and faster. So I'll start with the obvious. I think like 3 things stand out in my mind, but the obvious one being AI, right? Like just the new heights that we can hit with that, but just the expectation of the fluency. I think, if folks aren't building cloud skills or like feeling very native in their the tooling of their choice now, like now is the time to really get there. Like despite what your company strategy might be, if your company might be quite risk averse on it, I think like in your personal life, just get going, because I think it's really a baseline expectation for everyone now, and just having that confidence, but also obviously being able to use it with judgment, right? So knowing when not to use it. I cringe if I think about some of the comms I would have written maybe 2 years ago without having the judgment to know what reads as AI. So I think, that's the obvious one. I think to just being on the forefront of that, like being curious, being experimental, like not being behind the curve. Secondly, I think we're just going to see more of this split office, not office. And I think like the companies that really lean into that, stop being so confusing with candidates about, we're hybrid, but we're kind of flexible. And, some people come into the office on Wednesday, but it's not really mandated. I think candidates hate that. I think we really need to get clearer about it. And, when do we make exceptions, etc. I think that's just going to be a permanent thing. People need to like decide, build their EVP around it and move on. And I really do think that people companies that combine this extraordinary AI tech with these extraordinary environments are going to be the ones who win the talent war as such. The third one, I think the thing I'm most excited about is just the accessibility of talent. Having grown up in Google and starting there and learning about the homogenous groups that you can build when you're going down the same path of hiring, and just ignoring this huge population around the world. I think now access to learning, to tooling, just means that we have such a broader talent pool than we've had before. Again, if I think of like a thing that really marked my career and got me thinking on this line was back down in Australia, I hired someone who had arrived to Australia on a boat, an asylum seeker from Iran. No English, had never seen a computer, didn't know what it was. Unfortunately, because of asylum seeking in Australia, was in a detention centre on Nauru Island for a few years. But there he self-taught himself English computer science, having never seen a computer before. And shortly after that, I got to interview him and bring him into Google, where he got an amazing job. That was 15 years ago. He's still there today. He's a university
Amazing.
lecturer. He's amazing. But I guess the reason I bring up that story is because that was someone who we wouldn't have necessarily had access to back then, right? It was lucky that he was, so determined, so amazing, sort of to teach himself this and be a great candidate for us. But yeah, I think that's a huge new world that we get to explore now. Like, now that we've broken down some of the barriers to entry, what are the talent pools we can suddenly go after? So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I love it. And such a challenging but interesting 5 years ahead. I think there's so many challenges, but I also think so many opportunities for TA and the people function to level up, to amplify what we do, to add more value, to get time back, to add value in the spaces that we really want to create value. So great to finish on some visionary thinking, and it'll be an interesting few years ahead. So listen, this has been amazing, Caitriona. It's been great getting to know you and your journey from Google to Atlassian and then into that scale-up world. And I've loved hearing your take on people, TA, cultures. And I think that's exactly the value that you bring to the UK board of Visionaries. So very excited for what's ahead. We've got some very cool events coming up, as well as some amazing content to share with the community. And we're incredibly excited to have you on board. So welcome officially to the UK Board of Visionaries.
I'm excited to get stuck in.
Amazing. Thanks, Caitriona.
Thanks, Ryan.